Say, aren't you Charles? I saw you at 4 different weddings and that one funeral. I wanted to ask you, what exactly do you do for a living?
Yes. What I do for a living is work.
I figured you work, but I'm asking you what your profession is. You're always late to things due to oversleeping. Does that give me any insight on your profession?
Yes. Perhaps that. Or not. You see, I sort of do the business of shifting paradigms. I am work at things that. Well, okay. I manifest data elements into a preordained systematic and chronological arrangement of alphanumeric orthodoxy of typographic interface engagement while fiduciary transactions intrinsic to the commercial exchange process. I had this all worked out. I was going to say, in the utilization of numerical and calculative apparatus that orchestrate an amalgamation of content, which, thus harmonizing the intricate balance between, corporate narrative propulsion and paradigm alteration.
What? What the hell does all that mean?
It's just what I said. Say, is that a painting by Picasso?
That's a mirror!
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. How silly of me.
Look, what's your job title?
My what?
Your job title?
Such as?
Such as what you're called. Are you a teacher, a baker, a candlestick maker? Do you work in an office? Do you work at home? What do your co-workers and boss know you as?
They know me as, Charles.
Charles in what? Accounting, customer service, production?
Charles in English.
Charles in the English department?
Charles in the English language. It's what we are speaking right now.
You have no idea what you do for a living, do you?
Not a clue.
Welcome to Does This Still Work? The podcast looks at old movies and asks, does this still work? I'm Joe Dixon.
And I'm George Ramacca, trying to get out of character from the cold open.
Is that your British voice?
It's what I don't know. We'll see what happens after that. I'm George Ramacca, and today we're discussing 4 Weddings and a Funeral from 1994 and some historical context. First, podcasty stuff. You can reach us at dtswpod@gmail.com, on Facebook, Letterboxd, and on our YouTube channel. And Joe is on Blue Sky at joedixon.bsky.social. Please tell your friends about us and leave 5-star ratings everywhere. Yes, even the ones that never get married but are still invited to all of the weddings. You can pick what we watch and get extra per episode content by funding us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/dtswpod. This is a Patron's Choice episode, so you can blame the patrons for how this one goes. Now, Joe, take us back to 1994.
In this History Corner, we're going to cover, as you might guess, the biggest 4 weddings and 1 funeral of 1994.
Woohoo! Nice direct link to news stories. I like it.
I think it's safe to say this was the most famous marriage that happened that year. Since this movie takes place in the UK, we'll use a UK publication for this story. Headline, George.
Graceland marries Neverland. Presley and Jacko's billion-dollar merger.
Jacko is what the British press called Michael Jackson. Actually, they called him Wacko Jacko because, well, he did weird shit and dressed funny. He may have also been a pedophile, but that's a whole other story. In any case, he labeled himself the King of Pop, and he married the daughter of the man labeled the King of Rock and Roll. Absolutely nobody seemed to believe these two people were in love, and this was a real marriage.
So, if they'd had children, would they have been the princes of pop rocks?
Thank you. Yes, sure, why not? And I will quote from this newspaper article. Michael Jackson and Lisa Marie Presley. It's not so much a marriage as a merger. It's a marriage on a scale that normally attracts the interest of the Monopolies and Mergers Commission. 2 industry giants joining with vast fortunes to corner the market in pop weirdness and hype. Yet they have far more to share than the same nail varnish and tips on lip gloss. Both have fortunes so much larger than many emerging nations that they virtually warrant a seat on the United Nations. It's safe to say that Lisa Marie will never ask her husband for shopping money. She is the sole owner of the $25 million a year company Elvis Presley Enterprises, which earns more than Elvis ever did. It always belonged to Lisa Marie, who could not claim her inheritance until she turned 25 last year. His fortune began in his early years from favorites with his family and the Jackson 5, but the millions began flooding in when he went solo with such hits as the album Thriller, which remains the world's biggest selling record with 45 million copies sold. The Thriller video also holds the sales record, while Jackson's singles have sold more than 150 million copies. Like Presley's, his $500 million empire has been built up with shrewd deals and wise investments. Jackson, 36, bought Northern Song, the publishing company with rights to many Beatles hits, including Yesterday, All You Need Is Love, and Penny Lane, more than a decade ago. End quote. So in other words, he has the Beatles in his pocket. All them Beatles songs. You listen to Yesterday, All You Need Is Love, you're giving it money to, well, I guess at this point, the estate of Michael Jackson. Unless he sold it at some point. But
I think he sold it to Apple at some point.
Oh, he may have. Yeah, maybe that sounds about right. Either way, he had a lot of money. Now, neither spoke much about the marriage, although she insisted that they were in love. But it was a love that didn't last long as they got divorced 2 years later. Any thoughts, George?
Nope.
Okay, then we'll just move on. Whatever one thinks of that marriage, it's not clear either made any money out of it. If that was ever the motivation, but one hopes the woman in this next pairing, to the scumbag she wedded, she took him for all he was worth. Headline, George.
Limbough weds Florida woman. So is that like the lady version of Florida Man?
I guess that was the headline.
All right.
That would be right-wing radio blowhard and all-around demon spawn Rush Limbaugh.
Who is dead now?
Who is dead.
May we all rejoice.
For those of you too young to remember who Rush Limbaugh was, good. In 1994, he married an aerobic instructor by the name of Maria Fitzgerald, whom he met on CompuServe. CompuServe was the very first major online service in the world. It was founded in 1969 as a time-sharing and remote access service for corporations. It more or less still exists today, but its heyday was in the 80s and 90s. Limbaugh got married at the home of U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. That's right, Clarence Thomas, the greatest Uncle Tom America has ever produced. Rush's marriage ended in divorce in 2004. She was his third wife. He would go on to marry one more time before cancer finally did something good for once and killed him in 2021. Moving on, in 1994, Melinda French and Bill Gates got married. That marriage ended in 2021. Just like Rush, he ended in 2021.
I met them while they were still married.
And singer Harry Connick Jr. and Jill Goodacre were married in 1994. Originally, Harry wasn't on this list, but I didn't want to give an impression that everyone who got married that year is divorced, so I added these two. As of this recording, they have been husband and wife for 29 years. So you see, it does happen.
Yeah, good for them.
And finally, the funeral. A lot of famous people died in 1994, including Richard Nixon, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, Cab Calloway, John Candy, Burt Lancaster, but I think the biggest shock to the public was the death by suicide of singer Kurt Cobain. You were 13 that year, George. I was 27. Did Cobain's death have any effect on you, or any celebrity death affect you?
Not really.
Wasn't a fan of his music?
I wasn't heavily invested in anything at that point.
You weren't shocked by you like John Candy, you weren't shocked by his passing?
I didn't even know he died at that time. Like, I was too young to know that actors died.
You're 13!
I was still watching, like, Uncle Buck, thinking everything was just fine.
I was not a big Nirvana fan, which of course Kurt Cobain was the lead singer for, so it didn't bother me. I mean, probably what that really annoyed me was that he was the whole, and it's not the fault of Kurt Cobain, obviously, of the whole, he was the voice of a generation, and his generation. Why are voices of generations always white dudes?
Good question, Joe.
Every time I hear about the voice of a generation, there's always some white guy. It's like I never hear a woman being the voice of a generation, I never hear a black person being the voice of a generation. And he wasn't. And I'm sure if he were alive, he would say he wasn't. But that's the press for you. I wasn't that shocked by his passing because he had previously tried to kill himself, so he just finally succeeded. The oddest thing about Cobain's passing is the attempt to make it look like his wife did it. For some reason, people kept trying to blame her for his suicide. It was like, these two, got in trouble with the cops for the way they were raising their kids, for their drug use. But sure, if she was responsible for his murder, then the cops would have turned their backs on it. It makes no sense.
Nope. Some people just like drama.
It was just very, very odd. I was somewhat pleased about Nixon's passing. I thought that was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But I had no strong feelings one way or the other.
He did the final resignation.
He did. He finally resigned from life. The only surprise about Cab Calloway was that he was still alive. I thought he'd passed years ago.
Alrighty.
Okay, George, tell us about 4 Weddings and a Funeral.
This was directed by Mike Newell, who was the producer on High Fidelity, which we saw for the show, and he directed Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This was written by Richard Curtis,
whose screenplay work I've seen in War Horse, Love Actually, Bean, Rowan Atkinson Live, and Blackadder's Christmas Carol.
And I've seen his writing screenplay work in Notting Hill.
Now, how much of Notting Hill do you remember?
The general plot outline and characters.
Because I was listening to some other podcasts, as I'll do when I want to review something, and there were a lot of people, I've never seen Notting Hill, this is why I'm asking, who said basically Notting Hill and this film seem to have an awful lot in common, like they were almost a ripoff of it.
They do. And if it was a ripoff of it, it's because the same guy wrote it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he stole from himself.
Yep. So it's not really stealing, it's just kind of masturbation. I don't know.
Also, I'm sure everyone who's seen Love Actually knows that a lot of the music in this picture is also in Love Actually.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy Richard Curtis repeats himself.
Richard Curtis repeats himself.
He does repeat himself.
He does repeat himself. Blurbs! IMDb says, over the course of 5 social occasions, a committed bachelor must consider the notion that he may have discovered love.
I guess. I don't...
A more interesting movie, though, would be if he was experiencing all of this as a delusion from within a mental asylum where he had been committed as a bachelor. Amazon says, love-struck Englishman Charles Grant pursues the heart of lovely American Andie MacDowell. What? Through the 5 events of the title. Mixing, like, character and actor names. Like, what the...
That's right. I didn't know
Why?
They didn't know what her name was. They said, oh, it's Andie MacDowell.
Yep. All right, so this was produced by Polygram Film Entertainment, which is annoying since polyamory could have been a solution to the relationship conflicts in this film. Well, if the characters knew anything about relational ethics.
I think it's pretty clear that this is written from the point of view of heteronormative relationships, and there was no chance
hetero and
monogamous, yes.
Yeah,
so there was no chance anybody was going to do anything outside. It was just, you fall in love, you get married, and that's it.
Yes, this film is about the relationship escalator. We meet our protagonist, Charles, as his alarm rings to wake him up. We'll see that happen a bunch more times. Of course, he hits the snooze button. I find it hard to remember ever seeing a character in a film or TV show actually get out of bed when their alarm goes off. Joe, how many times on average and how often do you hit the snooze button?
You know, I don't know what this is going to make me sound like, but I don't hit the snooze button. I set the alarm for when I'm going to get up.
And then you get up.
And that's it. And then I get up, yeah. If I want to get up 15 minutes later, I'll just make that in the alarm. Like, I got to get up at 5 o'clock. Oh, I want to sleep a little bit. I'll get up at 5:15 or whatever. I don't hit these snooze buttons. When I set the alarm is for the time I'm supposed to get up.
You're either going to sound like a responsible adult or a monster. I'm not sure which.
Well, what about you?
It's hit or miss. Sometimes I hit the snooze button. But I'll hit it like once. Because if I hit it twice, I miss like a train. So I have like time built in where I could hit the snooze button and still hit get to the train. So Charles, which by the way, everybody in this film has like a wedding number or funeral next to their name in the credits. So this is Charles, wedding 1. But he's at all of the weddings in the movie. It's weird. Anyway, he's played by Hugh Grant,
whom I've seen in Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves, Glass Onion, The Gentleman, Paddington 2, Love Actually, and Small Time Crooks.
And I've seen in Notting Hill. Next, we see Tom wake up. Tom gets out of bed when his alarm goes off, contradicting what I said a second ago. He's the 7th richest Brit in all of England. Tom is played by James Fleet, who I've seen in The Butterfly Effect and The Phantom of the Opera. Next, we meet Tom's sister, the tall, lovely, inexplicably single Fiona, who we will learn has been inexplicably and unrequitedly pining for Charles for apparent decades. Unrequitedly because she could have asked him out at any time, and inexplicably because, as we will learn, Charles is really bad at dating and she knows this.
And yet he dates a lot.
She is not only already out of bed, but trying to figure out what to wear to this particular wedding. Fiona is played by Kristen Scott Thomas, who I've seen in Mission Impossible.
I am amazed I've not seen this woman in anything else. I know the name Kristen Scott Thomas. I thought, oh, surely I've seen a bunch of her pictures. No, I've seen it. That's it. This is the only movie I've seen her in, which is weird.
Yep. Fiona and Tom live together and leave to pick up more of their friend group. Next, we meet the ostensibly queer couple, Matthew and Gareth. I don't know, they're coded as gay and live together, but we also see them schmoozing women later, so who the hell knows?
Could be bi.
Gareth is the life of any party, and Matthew is affable, if forgettable. Gareth cooks up what I'm going to call Chekhov's breakfast, because that kind of cooking is pernicious. Gareth is played by Simon Callow, not to be confused with Simon Cowell.
For this podcast, we saw him in Amadeus, and I've seen him in Shakespeare in Love.
And I've seen him in that wonderful video game adaptation Street Fighter.
So that was sarcasm?
Yes. And he's another alum of Notting Hill and the Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of repeats, I've noticed in the credits.
Matthew is played by John Hannah.
And who we've both seen in The Mummy and The Mummy Returns.
Outside, they are joined by David, Charles's younger deaf brother, who will be profoundly influential to the ending of the film. Everyone knows him, but the only one who can reliably speak sign language is Charles.
Before we get into who plays that, why do you think the brother is deaf? I'm like, why is that a plot point in the movie? Why does the character have that disability?
I don't honestly know, which is actually a point in this movie's favor.
You see, I think I do know, and I think, well, I won't say it's a point against the picture, but I think that's the only reason this poor guy is here. If it wasn't for that, they wouldn't have a deaf actor in there. I assume he's really deaf.
Are you saying so that he can make lewd jokes and the woman in the group not understand what he's saying?
No, although I think that helps. No, I think he is deaf because he's the brother of Hugh Grant's character, and so they can have that conversation without everyone knowing what they're saying. Do you remember? Because at the end of the picture, he's telling them, like, oh, you should be in love.
Right, but he could just speak. Like, he could have just said those words.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be a sort of conversation between his brother, almost like a mind meld sort of thing, so everyone else doesn't know what they're saying.
And I think it's a point in the favor because what we look for representation is for the things about characters not to be the everything about that character, and him being deaf is not the everything about him.
I guess. I mean, there isn't really that much to him. Or anyone else in this movie.
No, but there is something to somebody who interacts with him, and I think it's one of the best parts of this picture, and we'll get to it.
Because it gets...
We'll get to it.
What? Someone flirts with him. That doesn't give anything away.
They don't just flirt with him, but we'll get
Well, we know what later, yes.
David is played by David Bower. Tom and Fiona arrive in Tom's Humvee, which he has for some reason, to pick up Gareth, Matthew, and David. They're all dressed and on their way to the wedding. Are we done with casting yet? No, because a movie about weddings and funerals requires lots of people. Charles is still in bed. He wakes up, looks at his clock, panics, and runs to wake his flatmate, Scarlett, who is also a chronically late person.
Scarlett is played by Charlotte Coleman. I want to discuss this for just a second. Now, we know Charles has enough money that they go into these weddings and all that stuff. He never says it's a financial strain. He doesn't seem to have any sort of... proud financially.
Yes,
he has a roommate.
You bring this up in a lot of movies, Joe. Yes.
He has a roommate, which is very interesting. But that aside, okay, George, you are the best man at my wedding. Would you really get an alarm go off and I'm just gonna snooze like as you're going to the job? Or would you like, oh my God, I gotta be up because I really have to be here on time for this?
No. Charles is a shitbag.
Yeah, it's like, what is this? This character's, and we'll get into later what else he does about the wedding. You're like, well, who does this? You know, it's not just your feeling. These are your friends. This is the most important day of their life.
Somebody who is scripted to be like that is like that.
I think that's scripted for it to be charming, though. It's not a shitbag.
It's not,
like,
but it's not charming. It's
not,
irresponsible.
But I think it's meant to be.
Yeah. Anyway, we get 2 minutes of car-choosing shenanigans that the filmmakers sinfully neglected to score with yakety-sax music. As the bride arrives, her bridesmaid Lydia is there to greet her. Lydia will be a bride later. We'll get there, so let's introduce her now. Lydia is played by Sophie Thompson, who I've seen in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. Charles is not just attending this wedding, he is the best man. I don't know how that happened because the groom, Angus, isn't part of the core friend group. Actually, I do know how it happened. He was scripted to be, so that we could see him forget to bring the wedding rings and watch his friends conspire to save his ass by providing outlandish substitutes so that his incompetence can be immortalized in wedding photos.
Yeah, you are right. This is really his best friend, the best man, because we really don't see him again. Okay, I know he does know him. He knows he's chronically late for stuff. So I don't even know why you would ask him to be the best man. And he's obviously gets very flustered because this had to have happened before. Maybe not leaving rings, but some other thing he's probably forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really wanted him to be part of your wedding, wouldn't you go, you know what? You're going to stay with me overnight. So both be at the wedding at the same time. And you make sure you have all the rings and everything. Would not have him at his own place. Because, he's irresponsible.
Mm-hmm. Also in attendance is Carrie, a something-something from the United States, who immediately catches Charles's eye.
Carrie is played by Andie MacDowell, whom, for this podcast, we've seen in Footloose. And I've seen in The Muse and The Player. And we've both seen in Groundhog Day.
And I've seen in Multiplicity. The wedding ceremony is churchy and boring, as are the still-in-church acts performed by other friends who will perform again at the reception for some reason. Like, who planned this? Joe, when you eventually find someone to marry, will you let me and Kit sing Beatles songs during the ceremony?
During the ceremony? No. The reception, sure. You can sing whatever you want. I won't be there.
After the ceremony, before the reception, out on the grass where the wedding party is wishing guests well and photos are being taken, Charles and Carrie have the shortest meet-cute we've seen on this podcast.
Great hat.
Thanks. I bought it specially.
And that's it, folks.
It is a great hat.
It is a great hat. This is followed by Fiona giving Charles the rundown on Carrie.
Any idea who the girl in the black hat is?
Name's Carrie.
Pretty.
American.
Interesting.
Slut.
Clearly.
To underscore how socially awkward Charles is, he accidentally informs someone that their spouse has been cheating on them for some time.
And one of the dumbest scenes in the movie. No, that is such a scripted scene. No one makes that sort of mistake.
Yes, Joey, that is correct. That was a scripted scene. This was not a documentary.
No, but that's the dumbest scripted scene. You're like,
Yeah.
No one really talks like that. He's like, oh, thank God you didn't go out with her. That girl was such a blah, blah, blah. Like, he would go like, oh, you're not going out with her? And then he'd wait for to find out what happened. You don't just blunder into the next thing.
It's a lot of low-level slut-shaming going on in this movie, right up until he finds out that the girl he has an eye on is indeed a slut, but we'll find that out later. And I don't use that pejoratively, by the way. We also see a woman named Serena take a keen interest in David, which will pay off surprisingly wholesomely later. She gets a cast mention on account of that. Serena is played by Robin McCaffrey. We also meet Father Gerald, officiant of the next wedding, who happens to be a friend of, well, everyone, apparently.
Father Gerald is played by Rowan Atkinson, who I'm seeing in Love Actually, and I know him from Mr. Bean and Blackadder, 2 British TV shows.
And I've seen him in Hot Shots Part D, and heard him in The Lion King. Charles gives a speech, him being the best man and all. He does the annoying and unnecessary thing of airing the new groom's dirty laundry. When I gave a speech at a coworker's wedding, I developed a spreadsheet to figure out my speaking rate and wrote on index cards a speech calibrated to be 5 minutes. I made sure to talk about the groom, his life before and after being involved with the bride, a funny, not humiliating anecdote, and my wishes and advice for them. Charles did no prep work and improvised hot garbage.
But the thing, I don't know how much of that was improvised, because later a goat does make an appearance and he makes a joke about a goat. So they obviously planned that ahead anyway. But I wonder about that whole speech thing. Now, he does seem like the type who would just make it up as he goes along, considering how he performs everything else in his life. So That's actually pretty reasonable. And I don't think the speech was particularly nasty. I think he put himself more down than the couple.
Yeah, but the speech isn't about you, dude.
That's true.
Even about putting yourself down.
Fair. That's fair.
And don't get me started on the toxic behavior around wedding cakes and weddings. No, just don't do that to your partner. Don't surprise them with cake in the face. If you want to do that, work it out ahead of time, but don't, tease them with it and make them lurch forward, lose their balance a little bit. Don't fuck with your partner. You just married them. Jeez. Anyway, the night continues with dancing and frivolity. Charles admires Carrie from afar, and Matthew urges him to talk to her. At the start of the night, Lydia is repulsed by another friend, Bernard. By the end of the night, they will be making out like crazy. They will be the couple in wedding number 2, but we're not there yet. But Bernard the groom is played by David Haig.
You know, one thing that was pointed out I hadn't even thought about, that the people in this movie get married real quick.
They do, yeah.
There's no long engagements. It's just like...
It's 0 to consummation and no flag.
Yeah. Because they get married 3 months later.
Charles has rented a room as what is described as if it's a boring, cheap, low-class pub, but is in reality a rather cozy, well-appointed inn for the night. Tom invites him to instead stay in his 137-room castle with a bunch of other guests, and Charles accepts this.
Which makes you think, why didn't he do that ahead of time? Why would he wait until the evening? Just like, I have 137 rooms, guys. We have friends getting married.
What they are doing is there's a giant pickup game of Scrabble about to happen.
Yes.
So they go to the castle to do that.
Yes. Well, he's going to go to the castle regardless because that's apparently where he lives.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, why not have that ahead of time? Why is it just suddenly spring on Charles? We know we're going to a wedding. We're all friends here. Obviously, you're going to stay at my place.
I guess Charles's deposit was refundable.
Ha! Yes.
Then Carrie comes to ask where he's staying, and she's staying where he was planning to. She tells him his speech was great. That is incorrect, lady. In Tom's car, in mid-transit to the castle, Charles decides to head back to the pub after all, because if Carrie will be there, he wants to be.
Sure.
At the Boatman, which is a real establishment in Windsor, and with Charles's help, Carrie hides from George, a rather haughty and obnoxious fellow. With my fucking name.
Yes, it is.
And that place actually exists.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I looked it up.
Are you thinking of going there?
I am now.
Apparently, the reason Charles, Hugh Grant, does so well with women is like, they're just waiting for him because he just walks in and she's already in that seat. He doesn't have to look around the hotel. There's apparently no other guests, even though a wedding just happened. And he's just like, oh, there she is. Got the only seat in the place, and she's sitting right there. And then this obnoxious American comes over, or whatever. He's not American. He's
not
another
American.
Brit.
He's
another Brit. Yeah.
She uses the staff to relay to Charles what room she's in, and Charles excuses himself to go to her. After some awkward silence and excessive use of the word skulk, they established a bit more of a rapport and then do some canoodling. In the morning, she pranks him with a "we're engaged now" joke and breaks his heart by saying she's going back to the States. And thus the first wedding scenes are finished.
What do you think of this character, of Addie McDowell's character, just that little bit we've just been through?
Flighty.
She would be, and then we see later stuff she does, like, I mean, okay, maybe need this initial thing, just, okay, this is definitely just a hookup. I can totally see it where we're not going to be get together again. I don't know why he would be disappointed. He couldn't possibly think this is going to be a relationship. But then she does other stuff in here and like, she goes beyond flighty. She's really bad, yeah. I think.
So we jump to 3 months later and another scene of Charles and Scarlett waking up late to get to another wedding. This time Scarlett is a bridesmaid and Charles is just a guest. They have some more transportation issues and get there barely in time to not cause a massive scene. At the altar, Lydia and Bernard, the couple who hit it off famously at the last wedding, are being married by Father Gerald. Rowan Atkinson does a lovely job of mangling names for comedic effect.
Here are prayers for Bernard and Lydia. Through your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Ghost.
It's British humor, and I like it.
He has a bunch of little bangers in there.
Oh, yeah. It's like 5 minutes of this. It's great. At the reception, Gareth tells Charles and Matthew that he thinks the entire point of marriage is to break the rut of two people who have already told everything about each other to each other. I think it has way more to do with our species' propensity for nostalgia and tradition carried forth in a legal framework designed by the state to incentivize procreation, but hey, to each his own.
I think his sounds more lovely.
Maybe that's why you're still single, Joe.
Oh, thank you.
Carrie is at this wedding too. Lo and behold, she's engaged. Charles is crushed, feeling like he's going to be the forever alone meme, despite, as we will learn, being a serial monogamist with an allergy to commitment, because of course he is.
Why would she be at that wedding? How does she know these people?
Well, she slept with everybody because she's a slut, Joe.
Although, apparently, he's the only one she's actually slept with. She doesn't really talk to anyone else, does she?
We don't know who the other 31 were. We will get there. At the table where Fiona is sitting, she has a conversation with an older lady who would prefer Fiona to be a lesbian rather than just single because it would be a more interesting story. Fiona then reveals that she's basically been in love with one unavailable man for years. That man is Charles. Why Charles? Good question, Joe.
I thought that actually was kind of amusing. Like, are you a lesbian? No. Why'd you ask that question? Like, just thought it'd be more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it would be. Charles, meanwhile, is seated at a table with a bunch of his ex-girlfriends. They proceed to tell embarrassing stories about how he talked about each of them to each other. Much embarrassment was had for all.
Why would anyone do that to a friend? Seating is arranged at weddings. So someone specifically sat down and said, let's put him with all of his exes and see how that goes.
Because they remembered all those names being associated together, so they just grouped them. Or they hate him and they want to make him suffer.
I know those names. Yeah, and they know why. They go, okay, was this also his ex-girlfriend? Was this also his ex-girlfriend? Oh dear, let's not put them all together. It seems more like something you really do to fuck with somebody.
Mm-hmm. We also see Tom, the best man for this wedding, give another cringy speech about the groom's relationship history, which involves many of the guests present. After the speech, the core friends are hanging out in a cuddle puddle on the couch. Charles laments being seated with his exes and says that the only thing left would be for his most recent and involved ex to show up. Of course, she's right behind him, hears him say that, and goes away crying.
Which, wow, she's sensitive.
She is. Henrietta is played by Anna Chancellor, and I've seen her in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
And I've only read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I've never seen the movie.
Then, in what I think is the most wholesome moment we've seen on this show in a long time, Serena makes herself known to David. She's gone and started learning sign language because she is that into him. That was a nifty little moment, and he asks her to dance.
That, I found it weird, because she knows who he is. She could call him at any time. She waits until they have this wedding thing to suddenly introduce herself to him, and she's learned sign language in that time?
She's learned some sign language.
Sign language.
Not enough to be proficient, enough to be cute.
Yes, and be amusing with it. No, I get that. I'm not knocking that she doesn't know it well. What I'm saying is, why wait until the day of this wedding?
Why not?
She knows who he is.
It's a wedding.
What?
People meet people at weddings. It's a whole through line in this film.
He could have been with someone else in that time. How does she know that?
Maybe she doesn't care.
She's like bidding her time. She's learning her sign language while he could be like involved with someone else. You're like, yeah, if you're interested, ask him out.
Anyway, Charles excuses himself and tries to avoid running into any more exes. He ends up ducking into an unlocked room. After he has a moment to catch his breath, Lydia and Bernard burst in, get on the bed, and start loudly making out. Charles hides in a closet and then tries to sneak out. He's seen by the couple, but nothing comes of it.
This is easily the dumbest scene. Just say, hey, guys, whoa. Slow down. I'm in the room. And they just walk out. But they got to make it like Three's Company. Like, oh, I can't possibly announce myself for some bizarre reason. And let them just keep making out. To the point, he's lying in the closet, hears them having sex.
Mm-hmm. Just outside in the hallway, Henrietta ambushes him to get a post-mortem about their relationship. It doesn't go terribly well.
All the time I thought you were going to propose, and all the time you were just working out to leave.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, you were. Shut up. Right after Henrietta leaves, Carrie approaches him. Her fiancé has to go back to London, and she asks Charles to keep her company. They take a cab to her hotel.
You want to come up for a nightcap?
You sure?
Oh, yes. I think we can risk it. I'm pretty sure I can resist you. You're not that cute.
The light of morning puts lie to at least one of those statements, with their clothes strewn about the room and them naked and cuddling in bed. Charles gets up, gets dressed, looks into her eyes, and without a word, leaves. And so ends the scene of the second wedding.
Do you think, I mean, they don't say it, I don't think it's ever pointed out in the film, do you think she was engaged? She's engaged.
She's engaged.
At that point, is she?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yes, she would be. Yes,
she is cheating on her fiancé with him.
Yes.
A month later, Charles and Scarlett get an invitation to another wedding. This time, Carrie's. The only thing on Charles's agenda for today is to meet up with his brother. That's not going to happen as planned.
Why would she invite this man to her wedding?
Good question, Joe.
Other than to torture him.
Because the script says so.
Although, the way their relationship is going, just based on not so much if you were just reading the script, you would just think, okay, this is just casual. She slept with him, he slept with her, and it's not like any sort of love thing. There's nothing serious about it. And yet, clearly, it is. In which case, again, you have to ask, well, even if it was serious, casual or not, why would you invite this man to your wedding?
Good question, Joe. Charles goes into town to where Carrie has registered for gifts. While we don't see him struggling with money, he's also apparently not loaded and can't really afford anything on the list. He's about to, and just audience, Joe did this like, yeah, all right, head motion when I said that. He's about to leave when a wild Carrie appears and asks him to help her pick out a wedding dress. Because he's her best fucking friend for some reason. That's what you do that with your best friend. Not the guy you fucked twice, once behind your fiance's back.
And why does he agree to go?
Because he wants to fuck her a third time, Joe. That's why.
I mean, like, I don't want to help you try. You're right. Why is one of her? So, all right, she does this, right? And none of her girlfriends, I presume she has some, although we never actually see her have any friends. One of her girlfriends
she's too much of a slut to have any lady friends.
They go like, hey, oh, you picked out a dress? Oh, you didn't invite me? Who did you go with? Well, this guy I fucked twice.
Yep.
Who I barely know.
So he does. And we see her in a variety of dresses, from solemn to sultry, with Charles slack-jawed trying to form opinions. Then they go out to lunch, and Charles asks Carrie about her sexual history. She enumerates, with a little color commentary, the 33 lovers she's had, of whom Charles is number 32. It's not quite 37 dicks, but it's close, and there's nothing wrong with that. It takes enough time that Charles is late to meet with David, and they rush off to do that.
Why does anyone make plans with him? He's always late to everything.
Right?
Or at the very least, you should make plans and booking in that he's going to be at least 15 minutes late.
Built-in time.
Built-in
time.
Built-in, yeah.
Charles introduces Carrie to David, who is subtitledly signing way cruder things than what Charles is translating. She ends up inviting David to the wedding. She leaves, and then Charles and David enter whatever store they were going to that Charles then tears ass out of in Carrie's direction.
Oh, no. I think they're going to a movie. I mean, not that it matters, but I think they're going to a film.
Yeah. He catches up to her and stammeringly tells her that he thinks he loves her, but can't actually form a complete thought. The cold open was this scene. She tells him he's lovely and then goes on her way, which is a really weird thing to say right after that.
Well, his whole thing is weird. What does he really know about this woman other than he finds her attractive and he likes sleeping with her? But he loves her?
Well, he doesn't say that. He says he thinks he loves her.
He thinks he loves her? That's still rather strong.
I know.
If you slept with someone twice, it had the same sort of casual relationship that they have in this picture, and they suddenly said to you, oh, I'm in love with you, you're like, what would you do with that? You're like, wow.
For me, that then follows a conversation of, okay, what are your expectations for this relationship? Like, what does you saying you love?
But there is no relationship.
I know. I'm telling you what I would do, Joe. If I have sex with somebody twice and at the second time, they're like, yeah, I think I'm in love with you. I'm like, okay, so what does that mean to you in terms of us? Like, what does your love mean you think we are? And how do you see this moving forward? I'm not there yet. I might get there one day. We're not going to move in together. I already have someone I live with. I actually have answers to how to do this that this film can't even fucking imagine. Fast forward another month, and it's Carrie's wedding. Of course Charles is late, arriving only at the exchange of I do's. Then Charles mutters this. Because why not?
Fuck-a-doodle-doo.
Sure.
That's gotta be my ringtone for something now.
Okay.
Or maybe that's my new alarm sound.
Yes, that would work.
I'll pitch shift it to be all high-pitched. Gareth, who seems to be having the time of his life, challenges the core friend group to not leave this wedding without finding spouses of their own. Nobody says, dude, that's dumb. We watch some of their attempts at finding the one. Henrietta is in attendance and informs Charles that she has a boyfriend and that she couldn't have married him anyway because then she'd be marrying his friends too, and Fiona calls her Duckface. Speak of the devil, Fiona appears and asks Charles how Duckface is doing. The rest of this conversation, her face does not look at all like a duck.
No, I don't know what that even means. That is so bizarre.
This was way before selfies made Duckface a thing.
There's nothing wrong with that woman's face.
The rest of this conversation is awkward revelation that Fiona is and has always been in love with him, and he does nothing with that information.
How could he not even know? Not even guessed?
Good question, Joe. The night is only half over. Carrie and her new husband pause the celebrations to thank those in attendance, to invoke her dad.
One more thing. Someone told me here, confidentially, that if things with Hamish didn't work out, that he would step in. And I just wanted to say thanks, and I'll keep you posted.
Clearly that was aimed at Charles.
I guess.
Unless has that relationship with multiple of her wedding guests. I want to see those movies.
I mean, taken out of context, it sounds like just a dumb joke someone might do, but considering her behavior, yeah, she's like, No, she's actually going to follow through on that. She's not joking.
Yeah.
Which you wonder, what does her husband think of that? Obviously nothing.
He thought it was hilarious. He was laughing.
Yeah, he thought it was a joke, yeah.
As her new groom takes the mic, Gareth finishes having a stroke that he started at the beginning of the scene and collapses. Most of the core friends drag him into another room where they realize he is dead.
What a faux pas, dying at a wedding.
I know, right? Charles goes to find Matthew, who saw nothing, to tell him. And with that, the third wedding scene ends, with Gareth now furnishing a body with which to have a funeral. And of course, everyone attends Gareth's funeral, even Carrie, who has delayed her honeymoon in order to do so.
What is her relationship to those two?
Good question, Joe. Matthew gives a very touching monologue about his departed bestie. That's the meat of this scene. I'm not going to play any of it, but it is a very touching, good writing on that.
It's a very good emotional scene. I want to say kind of cheap in a way, because it's a funeral. It's these two people who are going to love each other, but coded that way, because they don't do anything to give you an impression they were actually a couple. They never kiss, they never hold hands.
Eat breakfast together and live together.
Yeah. But other characters in the movie also do that, and they're not having a relationship.
Well, two of them are brothers.
Charles is living with someone else.
That he's the only outlier on this. That is that it would be theoretically possible.
In any case, it's so funny this film is seen as progressive for its time, but I think in 1994, they were doing a lot better with gay couples than this. This is just very, even when he's called up to give his speech, it's called his best friend, not his lover, not his husband. Well, I guess it's going to be his husband, it's 1994. But, something more than, this is just his best friend.
Yeah. After, Tom and Charles talk about why they're still single. Tom expresses an unshakable hope that he will find his one person someday, and Charles admires that.
Yeah, you're a sucker. It's never going to happen.
Sorry, Joe.
Give up. Give up. There is no hope.
10 months later, Charles is awoken in bed with Tom by a dozen alarm clocks, all set to go off to make sure he'd be up in time for his own wedding. He's still running late because all the clocks were set for a later time than he asked for. Matthew is all dressed and ready to go, but everyone else needs some work. They all get to the church way, way early, having tricked Charles into being on time for once. It was kind of cute. During pre-wedding photos and breakfast, why? Why are they eating while taking pictures? That doesn't make for good pictures.
It may be a British thing for all we know. Actually,
maybe.
It may be a cultural thing.
Fiona practices a speech saying she feared that he was married to his lot of friends.
Granted, we only see them at the weddings, but it's weird because that's the second time that's come up, but he doesn't seem particularly wedded to his friends. I mean, the one time we see him out, he's just hanging out with his brother.
Yep. A quick flash to the bride being readied shows us that he's marrying Henrietta after all. As the ceremony draws near, Fiona explains why she's wearing a many-colored floral coat instead of her usual black for this one. Something about hope and all that. As guests arrive, Tom meets Deirdre, his second cousin's daughter, and this is meant to be the meet-cute for him, validating his blissful optimism. And with that fluff out of the way, Carrie shows up and tells Charles that her marriage is over, was short-lived, and that she's available if he is.
If he is. By the way, it's your wedding.
Not in so many words, but what else would she show up to tell him that for?
Now, I'm sorry. Maybe monster's too hard a word, but what a shitty thing to do. On the guy's wedding day, you have this whole opportunity to talk to him and go like, all right, I'm breaking up my husband and I want to get together with you, or whatever you have in mind. You go to his wedding.
10 months have passed.
Yeah.
Their marriage dissolved sometime in that 10 months.
Yes.
Not that morning.
Not that morning. To go to his wedding, I'm sorry, that's shitty.
Yeah.
That's shitty behavior. It's supposed to be cute. And like, oh, they got to be in love with each other. But I think that's what do you think? I think that's a terrible thing to do to a person.
In general, I think it's a terrible thing to do. I don't think him and Henrietta would have had a good marriage, so whatever.
Perhaps. I mean, all we really know about Henrietta is that she's walked down the aisle and she doesn't want her father to hold her arm too hard. We're supposed to dislike her, but I'm not sure based on what. We know so little about her.
No, I think she's a delightful person, which is why she shouldn't be with him. Charles goes into a back room to fretfully ponder the implications of her telling him that. Then Matthew and David join him back there. David lays out his options, either marry Henrietta or call off the wedding. By now, Charles is running late again. He steels himself and heads once more into the breach or whatever. When the time comes for anyone there to have a reason these two should not be wed, David signs out that his brother is actually in love with someone else. Charles translates this and confirms the truth of it to his ex-girlfriend in a wedding dress, who punches him in the face.
Which, I'm sorry, usually against violence, but that's a reasonable reaction.
Yeah. Later that day, after the dust has somewhat settled, Charles's friends tell him that he made the right call because what else are they going to do at this point? And finally, Carrie shows up to check on him, and they go for a walk in the rain, and he tells her that he loves her. He asks her to be with him, but not to marry him, and she's down with that. The end.
That's probably the most interesting part of the whole film is that the two leads, it's called Four Weddings and Funerals, so you assume at least the two leads are going to wind up getting married at some point, and they don't. The whole movie happens, and even at the end where you see what happened to everyone on the pictures, they have a kid together, but they never get married.
Mm-hmm.
That was interesting. That's probably the most progressive thing about it for 1994.
Yeah.
The woman wasn't punished for sleeping with a bunch of dudes, and they don't get married at the end, but they do have a kid.
Yep.
All right, so, do you think it still works?
Yeah. I don't want it to, because it's so relationship. It is just like a giant celebration of the relationship escalator, and I don't want to celebrate that, but whatever. Rowan Atkinson was delightful. The guy that played Gareth was delightful too. There was some good acting and good lines and good writing in the movie. It's just I don't like the story.
Yeah.
But me not liking it doesn't mean it doesn't work, and plenty of people will still like this movie.
I'm one of those people. I did like it. There are a lot of problems, as I pointed out, but overall, it's a pleasant viewing. Yeah, I think it still works. I think it's about 4 weddings and a funeral. It's hard to go wrong with that.
I mean, the blurbs might have been a little weird, but that's for any movie. The title, fucking correct billing on that one. Truth in advertising.
We are going to still be getting married, and we're still going to be having funerals well into the future, so it's hard to really date that.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, some of the stuff about the gay relationship is a little weird because it's not really fleshed out. It's easy deniability because, they're not really a gay couple if they really want to do that. Andy McDowell's character is just not a good person. And then again, I guess Charles isn't either. But and I don't think the film knows that.
Perfect for each other.
They're perfect for each other. But I don't think the film realizes these people are terrible, which is kind of funny. But still, regardless, I've seen plenty of films where the characters might be terrible, but I'm still enjoying it. And this is pleasant. This is a pleasant viewing. It doesn't stay on too long. It's in and out. We don't get too much into the characters, I guess, which I guess works in this case. So, yeah, I think it still works.
Yeah, not much else to say about it.
No.
All right.
Oh, so this was a Patron's Choice episode, and the poll for next month's film is already up on Patreon. The choices are The Omen from 1976, The Silence of the Lambs from 1991, and How the Grinch Stole Christmas from 2000.
The Jim Carrey one.
From 2000, yes, the Jim Carrey one.
Because we did The Grinch Who Stole Christmas a long time ago.
Yeah, like the second or third episode.
Yeah. So, Joe, what is the theme in these selections?
I was afraid you might ask me that. Because I'm looking at this as well, and I'm like, okay, now The Omen was during Christmas. How the Grinch Stole Christmas is during Christmas. Or at least The Omen's about the son of the devil being born, whatever. It's all fine. But where does the Silence of the Lambs come in? I obviously had a theme in mind, and I have no idea what it was.
Okay, then.
I'm sure this makes sense, but I don't know how, even though I'm the one who put it together.
Listeners, write in and tell us what you think Joe's theme was.
Anyway, if you want to vote, but are not a patron, you can fix that by becoming one at patreon.com/DTSWpod. Now, George, what's up next?
Next week, we'll be talking about Weekend at Bernie's from 1989.
Speaking of funerals.
Yep. I mean, it's a delayed funeral.
Yeah, he doesn't get buried, but still he's dead.
He does get buried.
Oh, he does, you're right. Yeah.
Twice.
Yes, that's true. So I guess that's it for this episode. I'm Joe Dixon. Thanks for listening.
And I'm George Romacka. Thanks for listening, indeed, because if a podcast drops and there's no one around to hear it, it's just another collection of ones and zeros that doesn't matter.
So, John, how's that gorgeous girlfriend of yours?
She's no longer my girlfriend.
Ah, dear. Still, I wouldn't get too gloomy about it. Rumour has it she never stopped bonking old Toby Delisle just in case you didn't work out.
She is now my wife.
Excellent. Excellent. Congratulations.
Excuse me. You've been listening to Does This Still Work? Produced by Joe Dixon and George Romacka. The hosts can be reached via social media, email, or the contact page at dtswpod.com. Be good to yourself and others, because that still works.
Next week, we will be turking.
What, you Rowan Atkinson? Can a person be terrible and still a victim?
So, what is the cringiest Halloween costume you've ever worn?
You've been bitten by a radioactive grandparent who gives you superpowers. What powers do you have?
How would you describe the internet in one sentence? Speaking of drunks,
have you ever gotten so drunk that you went to the bathroom to pee and forgot to take your penis out?
which is cuter, babies dressed as animals or animals dressed as babies?